So as you can see, we've made great progress on this portion of the tin work. Everything that you see here is finish welded in place. All that I have to do to consider this section finished is do the box sections for the reliefs, for the triangulated links and the snout of the axle, but I'll do that the next time the body is off the frame because it'll be a lot easier to access that from below and make a cleaner finished product because of it. Pretty happy with how everything turned out. It's all nice and very structurally sound. It aesthetically looks really nice. All the bead rolling kind of flows together. So the next step in the process here is the drive shaft tunnel and the transmission tunnel. And what I have decided to do is to tackle the transmission tunnel first for two reasons. One, because it's going to be a lot more complicated than the drive shaft tunnel, and I like getting the harder stuff out of the way first and not leaving it for last. And for two, because once the transmission tunnel is done, we'll have point A and point B, and we'll be able to seamlessly connect those together rather than just going from here up to the snout of the transmission. We might have more of an awkward transition into the transmission tunnel because of that. So I'm going to start out today by cutting some more metal out of the car and cleaning it up. We're going to use this element here to use as the area where the new transmission tunnel will connect to. So we'll cut from here, continue this down, and cut that all the way down to here to the snout of the transmission tunnel. Obviously, it's going to be a lot wider of a cut than it needs to be, especially in this area. But once we build this part of the tunnel, we can just add the brake to it and flange it out, and then we'll just have a wider section of new sheet metal right here that will weld to the floor. And we'll build the transmission tunnel in two parts. We'll do the part from the output shaft of the transmission up to the actual front of the transmission itself, and then we'll build a second piece that covers the bell housing. So the transmission tunnel piece is basically just going to be flat on the top, and then once it reaches here, it'll kick up to cover the bell housing, and that'll give us a nice flat area to put a rubber boot to seal the shifter from the inside of the vehicle, and a place to bolt the shift boot onto. And so that's the plan here. We could begin after this height, which is much the same. We could begin to lower the transmission tunnel down a bit, but because the drive shaft, when the car is aired all the way out, actually runs uphill to right about there, we don't want to go down just to go back up. So this part right here will be level till right here, at which point it'll gently go uphill to meet up with the top edge of this section. The goal today is to get this portion of the transmission tunnel done and at least cleat into place to get ready for welding. And then one of the other things I'm going to have to do here is modify this. So this is where the clutch pedal and brake pedal go through the firewall, but I'm going to do hanging down pedals because I'm not going to use the underfloor mounted brake master cylinder because there's just no room down there with all the frame modifications and everything else, and it'll be a lot easier to run the exhaust and all the lines and stuff without all that down there. And then the way that the steering column is going to go through the firewall is different too. So this is the factory hole for the steering column. Steering column would go through here, and then the shift linkage would go through here, and there's a big rubber boot here. And I'm going to modify the factory steering column with a column saver kit so that it outputs a 3/4 inch steering shaft, because this doesn't have a steering box anymore. Obviously it has a steering rack, so we'll build a steering shaft to connect the original steering column to the Mustang 2 manual steering rack, and so we don't need these holes at all anymore. So I'll be cutting out a section here and shaving it so that there's no holes, because we'll only need one hole right there, which is going to be a hole for a firewall flange bearing. And so we'll just completely shave that, and then we'll be able to add in that flange bearing once we get to that part of the process here. So before I finish and weld in the portion of the trans tunnel that covers the bell housing there, I'll want to shave that, because then I'll have easier access with the hammer and dolly to planish out all the welds and get that area straight again. And so once I get the transmission tunnel portion, the back portion built and temporarily cleat in place, then I'll probably pull the engine and transmission, because it's so simple to do, so that I have full access to that. So I got the trans tunnel area trimmed out a little further and squared up, and I went ahead and I made this wireframe here. I don't know in the long run if it's really going to save me any time. I know it'll save me time making a paper template off of it and using it to check the fitment of the sheet metal piece I'll make, but the amount of time it took to make this, I don't know if it offsets any of that time savings, but it's a good way to kind of get a visual of what's going on here. So I wanted the transmission tunnel, at least this part of it, to be level, because the transmission is mostly level here. And since we're doing the transmission tunnel in kind of two pieces, this piece and then the piece that covers the bell housing, I wanted to make this flat. Next step here is to make a paper template that fits inside of this, and that's just going to be so that I can take this three-dimensional shape and then lay it out flat on a piece of steel to be able to mark it and cut it, and I'll also be able to draw on the designs for the bead rolling. So I'm just going to keep doing the same kind of oval elements that I did on the rear seat pan area, and just kind of have a oval bead rolled element on both sides here, and then on the top I'm going to have another bead rolled element that's just more of a square, that is for the shifter here, because I'm going to have a piece of rubber that seals the shift lever from the outside elements, and then I'll have a shift boot as well. So I'll make a little recessed square here, add some nutserts in there, and then we'll be able to bolt those two things above the shifter here. All right, I got the transmission tunnel bead rolled and bent up as you saw, and just did a quick preliminary installation here. Just have a few clamps holding it in, and I'm not able to get the whole thing on the bottom side of the body with the transmission in. So this side of the flange is below, which is where they're both going to go, and this side is on the top. I just want to put it on the bottom side because I think it'll be a cleaner looking installation.
I get $5 a turn for these things, so I get jumping right up and down. I get excited when I see a turn.